Hey guys, and welcome to the VFX vlog. If you're constantly looking for new plugins for filmmaking and visual effects, then this episode is perfect for you. FX Home, the creators of HitFilm 2, are going to be releasing a HitFilm 2 plugins pack. The pack contains 130 effects from HitFilm 2 and you can use them in your own filmmaking or visual effects software. I was lucky enough to get early access to the plugins pack, and I'm going to show you a few of the effects that are included and some of the fun things that you can do with them. A little while ago I created a Muzzle Flash tutorial using a software package called HitFilm 2. If you haven't heard of it yet, HitFilm 2 kind of combines video editing and visual effects compositing features in a single software package. Personally, while I felt HitFilm 2 itself still had a bit of maturing to do, I really enjoyed using a lot of the effects and presets that came inbuilt with HitFilm 2. FX Home, the creators of HitFilm, are going to be releasing all of those inbuilt effects in a separate plugins pack. Now, the pack contains 130 different effects and it is compatible with Adobe After Effects, Premiere, Sony Vegas, Final Cut and Motion. The HitFilm 2 plugins pack will be released on the 24th of April and it will cost $500. Now, yes, that isn't necessarily cheap, but if you have a look at a few of the other plugins that are available for filmmaking visual effects, sometimes single plugins can cost you $500 or more. With the plugins pack you get 130 different effects that range from lens flares to fire generation to stylistic effects, color correction, color grading. There's a huge variety of different effects included for pretty much any situations that you might come across in your indie film project. I do want to say thank you to the guys at FX Home because they were nice enough to give me free access to the beta version of the plugins pack, which means I've already been using it for about a week or two. And what I want to do in this VFX vlog, I want to jump into After Effects, take you through the contents of the HitFilm 2 plugins pack and show you some of my favorite effects and some of the fun stuff that you can do with them. The HitFilm 2 plugins pack contains a huge amount of effects and I'm not going to try to show you all of them. I'm just going to take you through a few examples, show you some of the effects that I like to use and that I think you will find really useful to give you a first idea of all the cool things you can do with this plugins pack. Once you've installed this pack, you will see a huge amount of plugins appear in Adobe After Effects, which I've got open right here, but this will also work in Adobe Premiere, Sony Vegas, Final Cut and Motion. All of the effects are categorized, so you've got different types of blurs, you've got effects for color correction, color grading, there's gradients and fills, different things you can generate, grunge effect, keying, light and lens flares, which is really cool. I'm going to show you a few of those. Particle and simulation, which includes fire and gunfire, which I'm also going to show you. Styling effects and some warp effects. It is quite a comprehensive list and I've actually found quite a few effects that provide pretty much the same functionality as some of the high-grade standalone plugins that you can get from like Red Giant or Video Copilot. Some of them obviously don't give quite as many options, but it pretty much covers most situations and visual effects that you might ever want to create. To show you some of these effects, here's a clip that you should be pretty familiar with by now. It's one of the scenes from our Zombie Hunter VFX short film. One of the effects I've really enjoyed using in HitFilm 2 and that is fortunately now part of this plugins pack is the Anamorphic lens flare effect. You can find the Anamorphic lens flare under the lights and flares category. Now, I'm not going to discuss the technical details of what anamorphic footage is, but you will recognize the very distinct type of lens flares that you get in this type of footage. Anamorphic lens flares usually take the form of vertical and horizontal stripes across the highlights of your footage. So this already looks quite cool. Obviously, you get a whole bunch of settings with this effect. So for example, you can lower the threshold of how much you want to blur. Maybe let's overdo it a little bit. Let's blow out quite a bit of the highlights here just for stylistic effect. You can increase or decrease the intensity. You can also control how blurry the streaks actually appear. Another thing you can do, you can actually change the number of streaks. Right now I have one streak coming down from the top. You can jack this up to 2, so you get one vertical one and a horizontal streak. I should probably lower the intensity, otherwise this is going a bit too much. You can also customize the streaks individually, so maybe let's go to streak number 2, which is the horizontal one, wipe it all the way across the screen and maybe jack up the intensity a little bit as well, or push it off to the left. Now obviously this is going a bit overboard, but I just want to show you some of the cool things that you can do with anamorphic lens flares. If you don't like anamorphic lens flares, you can also use normal lens flares, so there's a simple light flares effect in the HitFilm 2 plugin pack. Let's apply this to our footage. This is a simple lens flare that you can apply and place in your clip. It's also got an anchor point, so you can change the direction of the lens flare. Similar to the optical flares plugin by Video Copilot, you can also change the type of the lens flare. Now you don't get quite as much control, but you do get a pretty long list of different types of lens flares that you can choose from. Maybe let's choose this one here, the Anamorphic Halo. Now this one I like. This one looks pretty cool. Maybe let's place it in the scene just behind me. Obviously you can change different things like the position itself, the anchor point. You can jack up the intensity or you can scale it up or down. Whoa, that was a bit too much. I really like using lens flares in my footage, and this is an effect that you can definitely have a lot of fun with and that just adds a little bit of quality and intensity to your footage. Let's get rid of the light flash effect again. Now let's say you want to make it really dramatic. Let's set the whole scene on fire. HitFilm 2 has a simple particle simulation system that generates fire. Now I don't want to apply this directly to my footage layer. I'd really want to create a new solid and apply the fire to that. So let's make a black solid and call this fire. And then in HitFilm 2, under particles and simulation, you will find fire. So let's apply that to our solid. If you scrub through this is procedurally generated fire and it has 1,000 uses. Let's set the entire scene on fire first by changing the blend mode of the layer to screen. Now obviously this doesn't look very realistic, but I'm just showing it for stylistic effect. The other cool thing you can actually do with this fire effect, and this one I really like, is you can actually define which areas of your footage are burning and you can define areas that block off your fire. So let's say we only wanted the floor in our footage to be on fire. In order to define the flammable region, we need another layer. So let's create a new solid. Let's make this one fully white, because we're going to use white areas to define the areas that can burn, and call this one fire region. Let me quickly lower the opacity a little bit so I know where I'm drawing my mask, and then just add a mask to the bottom of the scene. Let's bring the opacity back up and let's pre-compose this layer. Fire region comp will do, and move all attributes into the new comp. We can hide this layer now, and now in the fire effect, all I want to do is for my flammable region, I want to select my fire region comp. This now restricts the region that will burn to the floor in my footage. Of course, this still isn't perfect, but there are actually a lot of things that we could do to make this look a whole lot better and blend into the scene really nicely. But I just wanted to give you a first idea of what you can create with this effect. For example, you could create a human torch with this. But that's probably a topic for another tutorial altogether, so let's move on to something totally different. Here I have a simple clip of a monster climbing up my back stairs and coming through the door into my house. One of the effects that I thought was actually pretty cool is insect vision, which you can find under the distort submenu. And what this will do is this will actually make your footage appear as if it was seen through the eyes of an insect, like a fly. You can jack up the lens size to increase the size of all the little hexagons. I wish you could push this a little bit further, but it'll do for now. You can also zoom the vision in or out, which determine how much the contents of each hexagon are going to be distorted. And you can bulge it up or down. Maybe let's bulge it down a little bit. So let's play this back. Now, this may not be the most universally applicable effect, but I just thought the idea was really cool. But let's move on to something that is universally applicable, and that is a muzzle flash. I have a little clip here of me leaning around the corner, firing off one shot, and then happily walking forward to inspect my kill. I have a separate tutorial on the HitFilm 2 muzzle flash effect itself. This effect is now also available in the HitFilm 2 plugin pack, so let's add it to the scene just as I'm about to fire here. So let's create a new solid, let's make it black, and call this muzzle flash. I'm going to set it to 1920 by 1080 just so it matches the size of my footage. Back in the HitFilm 2 plugins, under Particles and Simulation, you will find the gunfire effect. Let's apply this to the footage. And here's your muzzle flash. Now, one thing I really enjoyed in HitFilm 2 was that the muzzle flash is actually fully 3D. That means you can move the camera around, you can reposition it in your scene exactly at the position of the gun muzzle. In order to make use of the 3D-ness of the muzzle flash, you need to add a camera to your scene. So let's create a new camera. I'm just going to leave all of this on default settings and click OK. One thing you will notice, if I now try to rotate the camera, nothing actually happens. I was confused by this as well, but the guys at FX Home cleared this up really easily for me. It is because the 3D effects from the HitFilm 2 plugin pack integrate with After Effects a little bit differently. You need to add a new null object into your scene and link the transform of the 3D effect to that null object. So let's create a new null object, call this muzzle null. Finally, make sure that you enable the 3D switch on the null object. Then go back into the muzzle flash effect, and under the transform tab, you will find a transform from property. Simply set this property to your muzzle flash null object. And now if we rotate the camera around in Adobe After Effects, That's much better. So you can see it is a fully volumetric 3D muzzle flash effect. The reason this is great is because this allows you to place your muzzle flash in the 3D space of your scene directly at the muzzle of the gun. First, I'm going to set the blend mode of this muzzle flash to screen. Then use the null object to position this muzzle flash effect directly in front of your gun. Obviously, I only want this muzzle flash to be visible for a single frame, so let's trim down the start of the layer, move forward one frame and trim down the end. Actually, I'm also going to disable the visibility on the null object. And now let's move back a little bit and play this back. Yes, I know, my acting is pretty horrible, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to use the 3D muzzle flash effect from the HitFilm 2 plugins pack. Before we move on to the last example, I quickly wanted to show you two more things. For one, HitFilm 2 also includes a glow effect. Now, obviously in After Effects you have a glow effect already, but remember that these plugins will work in a lot of different software packages, and for example Adobe Premiere does not have a glow. With this plugin pack you will have a glow effect in Adobe Premiere. Finally, and this effect jumped out at me just because I thought it was so funny, under the Distort tab for the HitFilm plugins you can actually find a filter called Witness Protection. Let's apply this to my base footage. And what Witness Protection does, it basically just pixelates out your footage. Let's zoom in a little so you can see what's going on. So you can easily use it over people's faces or license plates or any sensitive information in your footage that you want to blur out. Now, we've seen a lot of lighting effects, we've seen a lot of creative stylistic effects. The last thing I want to show you is color correction and color grading. So here's my last example, and yes, you've seen this before. This is another clip from the Zombie Hunter short film. What I wanted to show you is that HitFilm 2 actually has two groups of effects, one for color correction and one for color grading. I will not go into detail on these. I've got two separate tutorials, one for color correction and one for color grading that you can check out. I'm going to put links in the description of this video, so do check that out if you're interested. All I want to show you is that the HitFilm 2 plugins pack contains a large amount of effects for color correction specifically, and another large effect for color grading. For example, there's day to night conversion, which you can now do with a single effect. Let's delete that again. Bleach bypass, for example, is just more a stylistic thing to kind of make your footage seem a little bit more cinematic. Let's increase this a little bit more, but bring up the brightness a little bit as well. And finally, one thing we did manually in my color grading tutorial is a vignette. If you apply the vignette to the footage, you can see some dark corners and you can kind of push this out a little bit. And here's a little bit of a gotcha. For whatever reason, I'm not quite sure why, opacity works the other way around. So if I lower this opacity, I would expect the opacity of the vignette to be reduced. However, this actually controls the opacity of the entire layer, which doesn't really make sense to me, but there's an easy way to get around this. In order to create a vignette, simply create a new solid layer. I'm going to set this layer to white and I'm going to call it Vignette. Then apply the vignette effect from the HitFilm 2 plugin pack to this new solid. Let's push out the width of the vignette so it's just around the corners. Next, go down to your layer window and set the blend mode of the vignette to multiply. So it just darkens out the edges. And now, because we control the opacity of this vignette layer with the opacity property in the vignette effect, by reducing the opacity, you're just going to reduce the opacity of the vignette around the edges of your footage. Obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg for all of the effects that you can find in this plugins pack. There are 130 altogether, and there's pretty much effects for most situations and most effects that you would want to create. So I do recommend keep an eye out when the pack comes out, check it out and see if it's something that you could use for your own film projects. I hope this gave you a good first overview of what's included in the upcoming HitFilm 2 plugins pack. It's coming out on the 24th of April, so do keep an eye out for it and go check it out for yourself. I really hope you enjoyed this VFX vlog. As always, if you have any comments, questions or suggestions, just leave them down in the section below and I will get around to answering them. Please remember to subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button up there, hit that like button and share the video around. It really helps out a lot. And as always, you can also find and follow me on Facebook or Twitter. Until next time, I will see you later.